Gosh.
Also, a warm welcome to Helen this morning from Astro Innovation. I'm really excited to hear what you have to say, Helen, after your revolutionary talks you've done last year. So a warm welcome. We're all excited to hear you today.
Thanks, Debs, and thanks for inviting me to come back for another one. I've just realized that the first talk I did for Roots was on the 15th of June, 2020. That's within the week of being an entire year ago. Can you believe it? This talk I have entitled, As the Current Astrological Story Deepens, Let's Make the Evolution Our Own. I've been talking about the astrological story underpinning current events for a year now, because it's so stunning and so staggering that I thought it would really help people drop the fear and just participate. But this is the first time that I'm actually talking about connecting with the evolutionary instinct that abounds, and really how to work with it within yourself and your own astrology chart. This period of time, which I call evolutionary, isn't just unusual, it isn't extraordinary. Those terms pale by comparison to what we're actually in now. It isn't just unusual, it's mind-blowing, really. And evolution is a big word. It's a big word. The dictionary says that it's a gradual development of a species from an earlier form. The development of the species. That's why it's such a big word, and that's why this is such a big and very important time. Not scary, important. But this is what's possible now, and it's even required right now, is this evolution. Underpinning this period of time, there are three distinct astrological themes running, which I've talked about before. I've described them in detail. If anyone might like to listen to detailed explanations of those, I'm sure Debs would be happy to share her links where those are lodged on the internet. The three different planets that are involved in this evolutionary time are making their first reconnection with each other in over 3,000 years. In other words, we didn't know about any of these planets. They hadn't even been discovered the last time they conjoined or were in coincidence with each other. But that's a really long time ago. This isn't something that comes up every year, you see. And I'd like to clarify right from the beginning that astrology, well, planets and signs and stars don't cause anything. They don't cause events. They don't cause you to do what you do. They aren't causal. What the planets and stars tell us is the story about what's going on. The astrologers are the people who read the stories. I like the word stellascription, which translates into you can read it in the stars. Well, you can read it in the stars, but please remember that it isn't causal. Even with Mercury retrograde right now, which generally befuddles communication, does not cause the communication to become befuddled. It lets us know in advance that that's what's going to happen so that we can plan accordingly. we know what is apt to happen in time that is in the future, not because the planets are going to make those things happen, but we can see the story. So that's what it's all about. We can advise you on how to handle your life, but we don't cause it. We don't produce it. We don't create it. In my previous talks, I mostly have avoided using astro jargon. I translated everything that I wanted to talk about that I thought was really important into commonly acceptable language that people can understand, rather than astro speak. But this time I'm going to use them both. I'm going to combine those because I think it's time we start sort of moving on into the development of the astrological part of it. And I've always said that the astrology that we talk about is not what you hear on the news. I never mention the major items that come across the radio or elsewhere. I'm talking about the energetic underpinnings beneath those events. And I think many people become captivated by these events. And that's one of the reasons I'm here today, is to say, please don't do that to yourself. You can become so overwhelmed by the stories that you hear on the news and so forth, that you forget that we're in an evolutionary period of time. And that what's really important is understanding the energetic underpinnings beneath it. I mean, there are people running around like chickens with their heads cut off. I shouldn't say that. It's a terrible phrase, but people are racing around without thought, out of a level of panic, I think, about what's going to happen tomorrow, and are we going back into lockdown, and so forth. That's not what's going on for us. What's going on for us is the energetics. Is that okay? Good. So here's the big picture, and I'll dash through the broad brush stroke because it's available on the earlier talks, but I'll just say enough to bring you up to date if you haven't attended. In fact, I think it's only Debs and Jennifer who've attended the previous talks anyway. So it's new to all of you. But I'll buzz through this part. Pluto, the planet Pluto is the planet that's running through the sign of Capricorn right now. And it's going to be doing that until the end of 2024. In my previous talks, I've called the process of Pluto moving through the sign of Capricorn the cycle of renewal. And it's an important point that one of the evolutionary components of these days is the whole process of death and rebirth. Death and rebirth. That which has really gone past its best by date needs to be let go of and transmuted, transformed into something new. Cycle of renewal. The second is the planet Neptune, which is passing through the sign of Pisces. That's going to be in effect until January of 2026. And I call it the Great Diffusion. The Great Diffusion. And the third is the planet Uranus, which is moving through the sign of Taurus. And that's going to be in effect through late April of 2026. Renamed as sudden thunder and lightning. And each of these has its own story. About those dates, one of the reasons for going back to the astrological approach and talking about planets and signs is to pin this to something observable. This isn't a fabrication. It's an interpretation of it's an interpretation of the astrology. And they're so different one from another. Here are the stories. The Pluto transit through earthy Capricorn affects us in our daily experience of form and structures. What are the structures of your day? Does the alarm go off in the morning? Do you have to have a shower, get your clothes on, and be out the door in 5 minutes? Do you go to the same place every day? Do you have a boss? Do you have a job title and a job description? All of those are structures. Everything that ends in an ology or an ism is a structure. The police are a structure. The government is a structure. The chemistry department at the university, that's 2 different structures. Okay. How about the structure of your mind? What's going on in there? Does it have any levity to it? Do you think the same way today that you did 5 years ago about certain topics? The old structures are old because they aren't useful anymore to us. And those are the ones that need changing. This isn't a matter of everything, including the earth, has to relinquish and surrender its structural component. It's the stuff that isn't useful anymore. So we're talking about death and rebirth of that which has become obsolete. There's another reason why something can, I keep looking at your mutes and you're all muted, but there's all this sound around that isn't in my little office. So if anyone knows why there's all this sound coming into our conversation when you're all muted.
I don't think Linda Scott's on mute. Oh, she is now.
Linda Scott. I didn't even see her.
As I scrolled down, she was off. I'll put myself back on.
Oh, right. Thank you. Thank you. I forgot where I was. Death and rebirth of those things that are not serving us anymore, whether we mean ourselves, our families, our business, or the human race, because they're all important. Neptune passing through Pisces, the story is that this reminds us that we are all component parts of one gigantic whole. That spirit isn't bounded, it's boundless. Spirit isn't restricted, it's everywhere, even in the rocks. In everything there is spirit. And Neptune passing through Pisces reminds us of the diffusion of spirit into everything. It discriminates not along lines of gender, age, national origin, wealth, intelligence. It does not discriminate. Ah, jeez. I hope that doesn't have to go through 7 rings. I'm really sorry about that. And that's why I call this one Neptune in the sign of Pisces, which is connected because Pisces is ruled by Neptune. That's why it's the Great Diffusion. And the planet Uranus is moving through the practical earthy sign of Taurus. And its big story is that it's time to revolutionize our value systems and to redefine what's important to us globally. These 3 stories comprise the evolutionary impulse of this period of 3,000 years of evolution. Those 3 stories. Reconsider the structures, let go of what isn't valuable. Recognize that spirit unites all, and examine your value systems. What is important to you and what isn't? Okay, those are the stories of the evolution. Now, the reason that I wanted to translate the language from the astrology into the more visual, cycle of renewal and so forth, is because I was interested in talking to people who wanted to listen rather than just talking to myself. And I figured if I was talking about Pluto and Capricorn, I was probably, on the whole, talking to myself rather than to you. And that's why I structured them. And that's why I want to use both now. So far, this might be familiar to at least 2 of you. It may be familiar to more than 2 of you. But I want to say that these evolutionary indicators that I've just mentioned, although they tell the global story, that isn't all they do. They tell your story, my story, everybody's story, because you know what about evolution? It only happens through those people, animals, life forms that move with evolution. It doesn't just descend from out of thin air. I'd like to remind us all about the little guy who lived in the water, who got it into whatever component moved that little guy to crawl up onto dry land. And in crawling up onto dry land, I don't know whether to say he or she, it discovered that it could breathe air. It might not have known that before. And there may have been a few of them lost in that effort, but it adapted for air breathing and became a frog. And it didn't wait for the government or Boris or any of them to put out the guidelines about it's time to crawl up onto dry land. There was something from within that little critter that impelled him or it to do that. And of course, unknowingly changed the entire course of history. Changed the course of history. I've been thinking about a lot lately about the 100 monkeys, the 100th monkey. How about the first monkey? How about the first monkey who responded to some inner prompting to do something different, to learn a new skill? Why? It never said to itself or himself, this is going to change the world if I do this. I'm on a mission to help the world. That wasn't part of it. It was more like an impulse or an instinct, or just did it. And as I'm about to start talking to you about making the evolution your own, and all of us making the evolution our own, I want to say that there aren't neon lights going to be at the end of your bedroom, saying you're about to change the world. You're just going to do something that grows, that resonates, and it becomes something big along the lines of the cycle of renewal, the great diffusion, or the sudden unexpected thunder and lightning. And by talking to you about making the evolution your own, I'm hoping to add in something new that perhaps we've never thought about before, which is conscious evolution. Conscious evolution. That term has to involve thought, intention, and will, and maybe some other features in each one of us. You see, what I hope to do is to provide you with a formula that you can follow along these lines toward your own conscious evolution through astrology. That's my intention today. And that's what I mean by let's make this evolution our own. This could sound very simple. In fact, I hope it sounds really simple, but I want you to not think of it as trite. It's any more than the little would-be frog climbing out the water. We could think of that as being trite. So what's the big deal? But it was a big deal. It was a big deal. And if this is evolution of the race that is being required now, one would think that if there were at least a few of us putting some conscious attention to that topic, without getting all blown up if I'm going to change the world, that it can't hurt. It sort of might do two things. It might speed up the process a bit. It might ensure that we're aware of it happening. And it might keep us from going nuts listening to the news reports. Because if we have something else to do, if we have another option, if instead of becoming frightened and thinking, this country has now got this many cases and, this, that, and all of that, if we had something else to do, like pay attention to what the astrology is suggesting is your best route to help out, even if it seems trite, then it gives you something else to do in there. And I don't think that is a bad thing. Every single one of us needs to evolve. If it's a racial, if it's the whole human race that's moving forward, that means all of us. That means all of us. And it for all of us, it will be those three areas, because those are the big planets that are identifying the nature of the story about the evolution. The cycle of renewal, the great diffusion, and the sudden thunder and lightning. One in our structures, one in our spirit, one in our value systems. Those are the areas. But we each need to do all three of those. We need to pay attention to all three of those stories as we're expressing them in our life. But we don't have to do it in the same way. And we don't even have to do it in the same area of life. In fact, there will be people who have sort of the same mission, but given that they're very different people, they'll do it in a totally different way. But I want to show you what I mean. I want to show you what I mean. Let us talk about the cycle of renewal. Let us say that in my astrology chart, it suggests that the place in my life where I need to be aware of pre-existing attitudes and maybe restrictions, any kind of structure that I need to change. Let's say that happens for me in my thinking. So my job is to look at what I've been thinking about that is not useful to me anymore, because I got cemented into something, maybe when I was 5 years old, maybe last week, whenever. If I'm cemented into a certain kind of thought process, I need to think about my own evolution to get rid of that and be free to examine new ways of thinking. But let's say that in your astrology chart, all of this aligns in such a way that it's not your thinking that needs to be not revolutionized, it needs to be renewed through the cycle of renewal. Let's say it's your job, or let's say it's your health, your dietary beliefs, or not beliefs, but just what you do. Then you're still working on the same lesson that all of us are working on, the cycle of renewal, but in your health situation rather than like me in my thinking situation. Do you see what I mean? And I could go through the other two dynamics, the revolutionizing of the value systems, to all of a sudden wake up to the fact that I'm involved with a friend that I don't even like. That it's a person that makes me nervous and I don't like that person. It's saying to yourself, where are my values in this? I don't like to watch television 8 hours a day like this so-called friend does. I don't want to do that. And judging your own value system for how it is obsolete and can be improved will lead you to an action. And another one of us might have that at work. That there's something about work that is just not going well for you because the activities that you're engaged in during your working life isn't satisfying. Then your review of your values and your revolutionizing your value system would have a very different style to it. And given how many of us there are on this planet, which is really a lot, if we each have only one area of life where it's our job to allow the cycle of renewal or the great diffusion or the sudden thunder and lightning in to that area, then that's what we're doing. And it won't feel to you like you're revolutionizing the world or evolving the world, but you will be, because taken among all of us, we'll cover all the bases. When everyone does his or her own job, it'll work. And if when you hear the morning or evening news, or heaven forbid, watch it on television where it really gets in there, and you say, wait a minute, I have something else I can be doing with myself right now in response to this. And you go inside and do the practice that we're looking at. Is that okay? So far, so good? Okay. I've brought along an astrology chart. It happens to be the astrology chart of my business, Astro Innovation. It's hard to believe, November 16th, 1996. 1996, I started Astro Innovation in Stavely. And ESL. So that's an astrology chart. It could be that some of you have never seen one before. This is a time stop picture of the distribution of the planets around me at the center on that day at that time in Stavely, South Cumbria. And that's where they stopped. That's a birth chart for my business. However, as important as Astro Innovation may be, it didn't cause the planets to actually stop. I've just got a time stop picture, but they all carried on moving, each at their own pace and rate. And these pie-shaped pieces, well, they'd be pie-shaped if they came out to the middle, but these segments are departments of life. The little guys in the middle here are planets, but they stopped at that moment in that segment or that segment or that segment or that segment, okay? So I've looked at where the 3 planets that are telling the story of our evolution right now, where they are right now over my business's astrology chart. This is what I do with people. I take their natal chart, look at where the planets have moved to, and identify which buttons are being pushed right now, how long that will go on, and what the best use of the energy might be. So I thought I better do that for my business. And I don't want to get too into the astrology. I just want you to see how this works. But over the course of the last month, I have left an office that I occupied for the last 17 years. And it was really quite traumatic because I made trip after trip from my file cabinets across the street to the paper recycling bin and wept with the separation from my past without having the time to go back through everything and really look at it. And I have moved into where you see me, which is my new little home office. Still trying to get over the trauma, but I will, But that entire story is depicted as part of the cycle of renewal over my business chart. I was blown away. It wasn't haphazard at all. Nothing's haphazard. And even some of the most trivial appearing things actually have great significance, or can have great significance in our lives. So I looked at all 3 of them, all 3 of the evolutionary impulses, as they might relate to my business. And I think it's clear to me that I've got my work cut out for me for the next, well, till 2026, when the Great Diffuser and the Sudden Thunder and Lightning finish the activity that they're on. But at least now I feel like I've got some direction. I'm not blundering through it. I know now why I left that office of longstanding and why I'm in my new one. And I can, my entire attitude about what I'm doing here in this new office has been lifted up, really. I'm not a victim. I'm not a victim anymore. And if this were your astrology chart instead of my business, and I looked at where the cycle of renewal is transiting, it would be very clear to me if it was up here and it had to do with your friendships, if it was over here and it had to do with your partnerships, social, romantic partnerships. You know, I would know that that's where you can do the most good for yourself and your own unfolding and your own evolving, which will in turn be your piece of the big whole of the race's evolution. It makes it handleable. You know, it's within the realm of your capabilities, because the benefit to you is that you can move again. You know, you have the freedom of movement again in a place where you might not have even realized how stuck you were. And it keeps you from going mad and forgetting that the events going on in the world out there aren't what's going on. They're the results of what's going on, not the causal. Okay, how are we doing? Good.
It's 10:02, Helen.
I think that's
So,
a good time to stop and
yeah.
ask for questions.
Yes, thank you. I'm going to stop the recording as well.
Okay.